me now on this broadcast is John Spencer, Chair of Urban Warfare Studies. And John Spencer, your appreciation of the use of air power, employment of air power in punitive strikes against terrorism, whether it's at Muridke or at Bahawalpur, precision strikes carried out at terror headquarters.
Yeah, I mean, very impressive joint multi-domain operation by the Indian Air Force and military in general. I understand the real capability is required to do that, and the precision and proportionality that was used by the Indian Air Force to penetrate air defenses at will and strike the very important terror camps that India wanted to strike, but also to defend Indian cities and Indian sites with a multi-factor air defense system for the drones and all of that the Pakistan military sent towards India.
How do you see the Pakistan Army and the Air Force targeting India? Because India's point was that these were punitive strikes, or these were strikes being carried out against 9 bases of terrorism, whether it's Lashkar-e-Taiba or Jaish-e-Mohammed or Hizbul Mujahideen, whether in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir or Pakistan's Punjab province, but the Pakistan Army and the Air Force choosing to respond.
Yeah, I mean, that's a telling example of the targets and the clear visibility and legitimacy of the Indian government to respond to this vicious terrorist attack, but then to highlight every site, what it is, why it's being struck, and then for Pakistan then to reply by striking at both civilian cities and military installations was a grave escalation of which we've seen continued. And the explanations by the Indian military, like that presser that we just saw, full detail of every site and why it was selected, is a real big part of a free society, a democratic society's explanation of why military operations are being conducted, that this state-sponsored of terrorism won't continue. But the Pakistan military has answered by escalating, by striking at Indian military sites, which also have to be responded to.
So, and in your appreciation, in the international community, when you look at an army targeting a location in another country which is seen as a state sponsor of terror, and some of these are UN-designated terrorists or UN-designated terrorist organizations, one, is that legitimate targeting? Two, the response of the Pakistan Air Force in targeting civilian areas or attempting to target civilian areas in India, is that escalation?
Absolutely. Absolutely legitimate targets, explained, reasoned why, but also with extreme care, even in Lahore airport where they were still running international flights, the Indian military hit very specific targets and was very discriminate in their targets, absolutely legitimate targets, to include the perpetrators of the Daniel Pearl assassination. So terrorism that has been allowed to be sponsored by Pakistan for a long time. And no, I don't think that the response by Pakistan was legitimate. It was an escalation of what could have been stopped earlier in the operation, but that continued escalation. And finally, now that we have a very tentative or very fragile ceasefire that we hope will continue, but a lot of these decisions get made by Pakistan.
India has also made another point very clear. Any future act of terror against India will be seen as an act of war. How do you read that message?
I believe it is clear and credible. You only have deterrence if you have capability, which India has demonstrated, immense capability, and the will to use it. I walked the ground of the 2008 Mumbai attacks, and what India's response was only diplomatic, even though it was shown to be Pakistan ISI-sponsored Lashkar-e-Taiba attack. This is a clear signal that that's all done. India will respond to attacks by the sponsorship, which was the Pakistan military and the Pakistan government. So I think it's a very strong message, but also a credible message.
And, since you've walked that ground, since you've seen 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks where the same Lashkar-e-Taiba at Muridke plotted an attack, and there's evidence that's going back to it, including David Coleman, Headley from the United States of America, who underwent trial at that federal courtroom in Chicago and was convicted, of course, in the Copenhagen, in the Denmark terror attack case. But his involvement, his going to Murid Ke, or Ajmal Amir Kassab going to Murid Ke and Bahawalpur, all these places, legitimate targets taken down by India, and will that deter Pakistan from using terror as an instrument of state policy?
I mean, it wasn't clearly. Hopefully, this will be a change. This is a shift. I mean, when terrorism comes, the world should not allow it. So this is about more than India as well. But India's change of its message and its actions. There will be no tolerance of any terrorist attacks on Indian soil. But this is a global problem. So Pakistan's continued sponsorship, training, funding, deployment of these terrorists is a global issue that the pressure needs to be applied in many factions of national power, not just by India, but I think in the global community.
And unfortunately, the global community really hasn't come up, and done so effectively. It should have done that a long time back. It really hasn't. But post India's actions against Pakistan, in terms of not just against terror, targeting 9 terror hubs, but targeting 11 military bases, will the world be forced to, one, take notice? Two, has India, in your appreciation, been able to call out Pakistan's nuclear bogey, that any response against terrorism in Pakistan, and especially in Pakistan's Punjab province, could lead to a nuclear escalation? With Operation Sindoor, has that nuclear bogey been called out?
I mean, I think it should be called out. This is the problem that we see globally. Just because you have nuclear weapons doesn't mean you get to violate all international norms and rattle a nuclear saber. But it is, of course, a very concerning issue that nobody wants to see that continued escalation. And that's why I really appreciate India's efforts to show legitimacy, proportionality, discrimination in the targets and why they're doing them. So there is no reason to escalate. Nobody's threatening Pakistan as a state and its sovereignty and its ability to function. But rattling the nuclear saber, it shouldn't be allowed. But we should also globally understand that attacks on India, like these terrorist attacks, can't continue. So there should be caution, of course. I'm hoping that Pakistan takes their words and actually wants de-escalation and doesn't continue to escalate, despite the superior military capability that India has shown, but also the resolve to do what's necessary to protect India. I hope it doesn't continue escalation. And no, I don't think that nuclear saber rattling should be a part of that conversation. Nobody wants that. And it is reckless when a nation does that. But I think the globe has taken attention, and we've seen even the United States president and others are taking attention. But this is also a matter that needs to be resolved.
Oh, absolutely. It's a matter that needs to be resolved. But clearly, that's something where terror gun cannot be put to India's head. Stay with me for a moment, John Spencer. You joined